Welcome to the MEd Leadership and Learning here at the University of Edinburgh's Murray House School of Education and Sport. My name's Zoe Robertson and I'm the Programme Director for the MEd Leadership and Learning and the Director for Teacher Education here at Murray House. The MEd Leadership and Learning is a professional master's degree with a dual academic and professional dimension. It's designed specifically for practicing teachers and educational leaders in Scotland to undertake practice-focused master's level study. It's structured to provide a coherent yet flexible pathway for master's study that's aligned with and supports professional learning relevant to an individual's own context, career stage and potential career pathways. It is practice-focused and practice-based, which means it is directly relevant to your current professional context. It's underpinned by critical inquiry and a commitment to developing the dispositions of collaborative professionalism. Each course provides a rich opportunity to develop knowledge, skills and critical understandings of practice, and each person's learning is absolutely highly contextualised and situated within their own context. The programme's aligned to the General Teaching Council for Scotland's professional standards, in particular the Standard for Career-Long Professional Learning and the Standards for Leadership and Management, with the Postgraduate Certificate for Into Headship also leading to the award of the Standard for Headship. The programme is also underpinned by the National Model of Professional Learning. We're currently open for applicants onto the next intake of the Postgraduate Certificate for Middle Leadership and Management, which is 60 credits, and it's aimed primarily at middle leaders working in school context. So, for example, a PT or a curricular lead or a faculty lead would find this an appropriate and relevant course of study. We're also looking to recruit applicants to the Postgraduate Certificate core processes, and this is aimed primarily at those practitioners who are currently based in a classroom. So you would be looking at and focusing on developing inquiring approaches into practice and understanding practice through that lens. Thanks to the support from the Scottish Government for master's level study, there are a number of funded places still available for an August 2022 start. The MEd Leadership and Learning programme comprises in total of 5 certificates, each one 60 credits. Each certificate can be taken on its own, and to achieve the full MEd in Leadership and Learning, you can take a combination of any 2 certificates plus the extended work-based project is required. We hope to be able to welcome you to the programme soon. Thanks.
I think the biggest factor for me about doing the MEd at Edinburgh University is that a lot of it is self-led. So while they structure the modules at Edinburgh University and they have the outcome that they're looking for from you, they're looking to develop particular skills in you, it's up to you how you thematically look at those. So for me, I identify as mixed ethnicity. I'm from a minority ethnic background, and that's something that I was really interested in. Initially undertook the self-study, and during the self-study module realised how much my own ethnicity has impacted how I perceive education, the kind of practitioner that I am, how I value my role in society. All of that was really heavily influenced by my own ethnicity, and the staff at Edinburgh University were so supportive, and it meant that through the duration of my time at Edinburgh, all of the modules I then tailored to that school of thought and thinking about my own ethnicity and looking at diversity in education, looking at diversity in teacher leadership as well, and how that impacts policy, curriculum development, and wider social change. So it had a massive impact for me that I was able to tailor the entire duration of my education around my own interests and around me as a person. So it was really valuable to me.
With the university degree, for me, it's being compared as a standard across Scotland. You know that it's to a certain level, and that means quality-wise, you're getting value for money. and you're getting something that's really been thought through.
I think for me it was the opportunity to link up with middle leaders and school leaders who you maybe necessarily wouldn't have come across in your day-to-day school. It was the opportunity to link up with people in different sectors, and I think that really helped to widen my perspective around middle leadership and teacher leadership and how different that can look, hearing from different people about their different kind of expectations.
I had gotten to a sort of stage in my career where I felt like I was fairly competent in the role that I was in at the time. I felt like I found a kind of plateau, but there was something deeper, that there might be an opportunity through study to get more of a critical perspective on what we were doing and on the wider issues that play within the sector. And I felt, having got to that stage in my career, that was a good time to do that.
Certainly my middle leadership one, I really enjoyed the taught days in terms of just going in to learn from other people and to have that kind of space. Although it was about my leadership, it's also that both programmes kind of have a focus on what you're doing within your job. And I like the fact it's tied into the practical element of your job and it doesn't feel like an add-on.
Originally, I started the modules with a self-study, and that really did impact how I perceived myself in the classroom. And I think a lot of classroom practitioners, your first instance is, how is this going to impact my classroom practice and how is it going to impact the learners in my classroom? I then started to think of myself out of the classroom and as part of a wider educational structure in society, and how does my practice and my thinking then impact social change, educational reform. It really showed me that I do have a role in that, and as a classroom practitioner I have a right to have a role in that, and I found it really empowering, and that's how it hugely restructured my thought. It developed my theoretical understanding of educational structures, theory around ethnicity, diversity, globalisation, this idea of community, all these things that I'd seen as quite abstract to education before. I was able to look at those in depth and amalgamate them with my theoretical knowledge about education, pedagogy. So it was really seeing where education fits in a wider social structure, and where my role as a practitioner fits in a wider social structure. So yeah, it had a huge impact, like a profound impact on my practice and me as a person.
Through the course, I did become a principal teacher, and then I became a peripatetic principal teacher as well. And then laterally, towards the end of the middle leadership course, I had moved into an education officer role. So my own leadership did change, and I do put that down to having been on this course, and I think even having the confidence for going for posts that I maybe wouldn't necessarily have kind of felt that I had the skills to go for. And I think the biggest thing for me was about being able to reflect on my values in terms of my leadership, and what are my real core principles in terms of the leader that I am, and also I suppose where I fit well in a team, kind of recognising people who have similar leadership values to myself. And I think it also helped me to understand sometimes, when there was maybe differences of opinion, it kind of helped you to understand just a bit more about kind of how people work and kind of, what leadership is important.
So I'm now in a DHT's post, so I think I've definitely become more strategic, definitely become better at looking at the bigger picture, the political dynamic that exists that you perhaps don't see before. And I would say thinking about other people's professional learning is probably one of the biggest impacts as well, just in terms of having kind of been through these courses, but also thinking about how do we actually move forward with our professional learning, how do we make sure it is actually valuable and that other people are learning from what we do.
One of the earliest readings that we were given was looking at activism in education, and I think that really does spur you on, that you think, I have an autonomy in this and I'm responsible for the kind of practitioner that I am, and if I want to impact wider social change, I can do that.
It's about making sure that all this is transferable and that it's not just me writing an assignment that disappears into a drawer, never to be seen again. It's about the fact that I know my team can look at me and can see it and know that I'm using it to improve the service, not just to improve my leadership skills.
One of the key things for me in my development, I think, has been really moving from that inquiry as a project stance to inquiring mind, and approaching my professional development, approaching day-to-day issues in that inquiry stance more generally. And that's been really helpful. So I've kind of developed the skills to break problems down, to understand when to seek advice and where to go for it, where to gather data and how to take a critical perspective on data. Those kind of skills for me in developing my leadership has been really, really important. because it's meant that I've been able to continually reflect on the kind of day-to-day experiences and build on my own practice. But I think really importantly, it's also allowed me to bring other people on that journey. So as a leader, we have a responsibility to develop the leadership capacity in others as well. So I'm using my experience and my knowledge of inquiry to kind of support others on their journey now, be that signposting into their own master's level learning, or be that supporting professional development programs in-house that build in those same principles that I find so useful.
A lot of the time you go along, to CLPL training, and you listen and you think it's great ideas, but often you go back to the hustle and bustle of the classroom, and you're lucky if you implement one or two things that come from it. Whereas I think with this course it was more about focus on yourself, and there was a lot of reflection and kind of personal time, and sometimes you'd feel guilty that you hadn't done as much work, but I often felt that, in situations in school, I was reflecting on things that we'd covered in the course or things that I had read. And so I think it's more than just a training opportunity that you go along and listen to. It really does evolve into part of your leadership journey. There's no getting away from how you reflect upon yourself as a leader once you've done something like this.
For me, this course is about the fact that you have your taught days, you have the booklets in between and the assignments and the readings to guide you, but it was about making me take space to reflect on what I'm doing. We have very, very busy lives as teachers and as leaders. Much as I do think I'm reflective, it forced me to have that space and to take that space. And I think that's when you do your best learning.
Even just having the confidence to cascade your own knowledge that I developed on the course, being able to cascade that at staff meetings, lead staff development as well, and the knowing that I have that understanding, that I can share it, is really empowering in itself. And it develops relationships with staff in the school as well, if you're able to offer something to the staff group and lead something like that. So in my professional practice, it's had a huge impact with fellow practitioners as well as the pupils in my classroom.
It's helped by the subsidies, I'm not going to lie, in terms of the university and the TEPact. It's supported by your local authority. I think that's really important, because sometimes other CPD, while it might be relevant to your setting, things like that, it's not necessarily supported by the authority, which can make it a bit more challenging in terms of people giving you the space and the time to take part in these and actually to get as much out of it as you possibly can.
The critical inquiry was fantastic because it showed me that actually there is another way to explore professional learning through starting with your own practice and your own reflections on your practice and the needs of your students. And that just seemed immediately to me to be a really powerful way of reconceptualizing what professional learning was all about. As I continued with that, I found it a difficult process. I found it was a disruptive process. It challenged some of my ideas. It showed up some areas of practice that actually I thought I was quite satisfied with, but on reflection, it was problematic and it needed to change. And so I felt that I'd never really gained as much benefit in terms of my own understanding and my own development as when I'd engaged with that process, as painful as it had been to kind of face some of those hard truths that it threw up. That kind of master's level learning was a great gateway for me in terms of continuing on that journey.
I think at the time, you understood the words on the paper, you understand what it was about, but actually going back to it, having had, several years of classroom experience, I actually understood it, and I could picture learners in what I was reading, or I could picture, staff in situations in it. And I think going back to a lot of that with the classroom experience behind you then does make you kind of read it in a different way and think about it in a different way.
Nobody likes to write the assignments or anything like that, but when I look back at them, you see how far you've come. You see where your reading's fitted in. I can tell where my reading fits into how I am as a leader now, and that's not necessarily the case with other professional learning that I've done.
You were taught quite early on in the modules how to engage with policy documentation that was coming down, and also empowered to question things when you didn't feel confident initially. I think for me, especially coming out of probation and then going straight into this course, you don't feel experienced enough to question anything that's given to you, whereas the course really does empower you to question why are we implementing this, who does it serve, what is the purpose of this, and I think for my classroom practice that's been major. I mean, as a staff, being able to confidently speak with fellow practitioners about it, having a staff work group who are open to discussing that, a head teacher who's really supportive, and just being able to engage with new policy that's coming to me as a classroom practitioner and question it and understand why I'm implementing it, or even knowing what to do if there's something that I don't necessarily agree with. Having the confidence to question that has been a huge part of my practice.
What the literature that we were engaged in the coursework that we were doing allowed us to do was to kind of marry that, I suppose, to theory in order to kind of understand it from a different perspective. And it gave you that insight into why we do what we do and why we do things the way we do things. And sometimes it raised, again, some kind of challenging questions around whether that was the right way to do things and whether there were better ways.
Definitely helped me on my leadership journey, and I think, at interview stage it gave me things to talk about and to reflect upon. I valued the kind of input from the tutors as well.
I would say I'm probably a very different leader than what I was when I first started out on the MEd. Certain things kind of come along that challenge your thought. It makes you think about who you are. It's not necessarily that my values have changed, but I guess what I've learned to do is have courage about my values and have courage to stick to my values that I probably wouldn't have had before I started the course. And I think that kind of comes from the fact I've had time to do that reflection, I've had time to do that reading, and actually I'm okay with saying what I've got to say. I'm okay with challenging people about things, and that is probably the biggest difference that I see. I was always an organised individual. People would have said that about me before I started the course, but now it's about the fact that I can pick out and I can continue to argue the case about what's good for the service and what's good for the team, as well as recognise what others have got to say.
It's about those cycles of critical reflection. It's about that opportunity just to gain a wider perspective through the reading and through the experiences that you are exposed to on the course, the speakers that contribute to the learning, the different perspectives that you hear from. All of that just gave me the opportunity to actually have more control, I think, over my own leadership journey and the way that I was developing. So it was very powerful for me. It led on to some wider opportunities for me later on. I'm now in a depute post in another school, and I think having carried on that journey just it's really always kind of been there. I've carried on learning, carried on reading, and carried on reflecting, and it's got me to where I am.
One of the other things that was really beneficial was being able to network with other practitioners and people throughout the education system, not necessarily their classroom practitioners. That's really benefited my classroom practice, and being able to engage with new working parties that I've been asked to be a part of, or even being able to speak to practitioners and other authorities and go out and do school visits with them, see their practice. So I think professionally networking has been a massive impact of the course as well, because you were invited along to networking events, you were invited along to showcase your work. I've also been invited along to conferences like the Scottish Educational Research Conference. I presented at that, which was an amazing opportunity. So in terms of being able to access networking, it's been huge.
Some of the people that I touched base with on the course in my own local authority were people that kind of then I kept in touch with, and it was really helpful to kind of have that wider perspective, I think, of leaders across my authority, people that, they didn't work in my cluster, they didn't work in the same sector as me. I found that really helpful as I continued on my leadership journey in the local authority.
It was fantastic just to be able to meet with other middle leaders across the country and to be able to just have a chat with them. It's very easy, I think, in the profession to get quite siloed, whether it's within a department, within a classroom, or within a school. And as leaders, we do have a wider school perspective, but how often do we really get the opportunity to network more widely across the sector? And I think that's really important, and it's one of the things that this course definitely allowed me to do. Because there was people from all the authorities across the sort of central belt, it really did give that broader perspective. And not just about the differences between local authorities and between our schools, but also some of the similarities, some of the issues that we were seeing coming through. And of course, the tutors, I always thought, were very skilled at tapping into that, directing our discussions and our reading towards those kind of themes that would help us all to develop a bit more of a depth of understanding into them. And then, facilitate that kind of critical debate and dialogue. And it was just really, really helpful. And I made a lot of good friends on the various courses I've been on, and I'm still friendly with people now.
It's about making sure that you're setting aside the time for it. So if you're going to do it, it's absolutely fantastic. I loved it. Loved every minute of it. But it takes a time commitment. So you have to be willing to know that you have a supportive family around you. The people you live with are supportive, because there will be times when you're sitting doing lots of reading. It's really interesting reading. It can be overwhelming when you get the booklets in between each stage and you think, oh, look at all this stuff. But you have to learn to work out what suits your context, what will be useful for your context. But just also be aware that you've got support around you. It's helpful if you know somebody on the course, or you make friends on the course, and that becomes invaluable. For both courses, it's just having that person to kind of touch base with and speak to about what's going on, because there will be months when you don't get stuff done, and then there will be other months where actually you can. So it's about recognising that you don't have to do absolutely everything, but recognise that time commitment has to be there.
I found doing the tasks kind of right away. So, the weekend that I had done the session, and then just having some time to reflect back on it ahead of the next one was more beneficial. If I was to give advice to people, do a little bit and keep chipping away at it, because there's nothing worse than sitting up trying to kind of cram everything, a few days ahead of it. So yeah.
The most important thing would be to tailor it to your own interests. Whatever you find in your classroom practice that impacts how you work alongside children in your classroom, how you best serve them, how you work alongside colleagues, fellow practitioners, you need to have something that you're interested in. It is a really engaging course, and there is so much along the course that you can implement in your classroom. It's not always additional work, because it'd be things that you're exploring anyway as part of your own professional development. And I think if there is something you're passionate about in education, this is the opportunity to do it, and you can absolutely implement that alongside your classroom practice. The workload isn't huge if it's something that you're interested in, or something that you feel challenged by, or that you want to question. If you're passionate about it, that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Organisation is absolutely fundamental. You do need to be really disciplined in making sure you set time aside for it. And I think a lot of people find that challenging in the day-to-day when it's really busy and you've got a million things on your to-do list. But you know what? You're really important too, and making time for your own professional learning is one of the big lessons that I've had to take from this. And just setting that time aside to do the reading and to engage with the work, it does bear fruit. And you have to, I think, remember that if you think about it in the long term, it will pay off. But in the short term, when you're staring at that to-do list, it might not feel that way. But I would advise you to try and keep your eye on the long game when it comes to making time for your learning and your reading.
Hi, my name's Kevin Brack, and I'm the Deputy Programme Director of the MEd Leadership and Learning. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our former participants on the programme and hearing about their experiences and what they've learned through the process. We hope it's given you an insight into what it might feel like to be a student with us on the MEd Leadership and Learning. If you'd like to have some more information about the programme, please go to our website, please follow us on Twitter, or get in touch by email. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you really soon. Thank you.